Hello, Daily Bible readers. This is your day 193 preview of our reading of the New Testament and of Genesis. Today's reading is going to cover actually two books, which are simply two chapters. And we're going to be looking at both 2nd John and 3rd John, both together in this particular video. Now, they fit together very well because unlike 1st John, 2nd and 3rd John appear to be written to individuals. 1st John seems to be written more from the standpoint of to a congregation, while 2nd and 3rd John seem to be a little bit more pointed and directed. In fact, you're going to find a similar theme through all three books, and you're going to find some of the warnings that John writes in 1st John repeated directly with some personal examples in 2nd and 3rd John. Now, 2nd John appears to have been written to whom he calls the elect or the chosen lady. Now, we could consider that could be to a particular congregation, and then the children of that elect or chosen lady could be those individuals who have come to Christ because of it. Again, once I pair it with 3rd John, it seems to fit a little closer that this is a specific lady whom John knows. He refers to himself in both of these as the elder, and that he knows them directly as an individual and are rejoicing in them specifically and encouraging them and warning them each specifically in this case. Now, the thing that John writes that he loves of this particular lady is the truth. You're going to find the word truth multiple times through both of these books. I mean, really short books. 1st John is 13 verses, and 3rd John is 14 verses. But in that, I want you to go through and count how many times you find the word truth. John is a believer in the truth and that there is only one truth. Now, again, one of the false teachings that he's going to direct is against the truth is going to be this idea that Jesus has not come in the flesh, and that is an antichrist view, and that those individuals are working within the church at this point, but not the elect lady and her children. Now, while they're not caught up in that now, John knows that there's always the chance that as perceived knowledge might be a good word for it. As perceived knowledge grows, perhaps you feel that I've grown past the knowledge of what was originally delivered to me. And John and all of the writers of the Scripture, particularly those of the epistles, Paul and John specifically, uh, concentrate on the idea that what you had in the beginning was the complete truth. There's not more truth to come or to be discovered or to be rolled out. When God rolled out the plan of salvation, it was complete in itself at that time. And so for John writing these epistles and probably later in his life, so we could put it all as far as I don't know that you can go really past AD 100. Jesus is perceivably dying around AD 33. And so John's not going right past AD 100 or so. And so no matter where you put this, that perceived additional knowledge is already appearing then. And John and Paul both are discounting it, that it's not a new gospel. There's not more to the gospel. And if that was the case then certainly it's not the case today. Some 2,000 some odd years later, we don't have new gospel, new revelation, new ideas, new understandings that trump what was delivered and what we can read here. The truth was the truth then and was complete in its ability to save man. And so Paul rejoices that this elect lady and her children continue in that truth. Because that truth, verse 2, or the truth, abides in, he says, in us, including himself in that count, and will be with us forever. It's here, it's in us, and it continues. And so he was rejoicing, verse 4, because he found that her children walking in truth. in an understanding of that truth. What needed to be paired with that, obviously, then is, well, John's theme throughout all three books: love. He writes of it as a new commandment in the same way that Jesus said, I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And how has Christ loved us? He went to the utmost ends to bring and teach the truth of salvation to us, to make it possible for us. And verse 6 says, this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. He did it all for us. Now we continue to show our love by walking in love for one another, just as he walked in love for us. Now, there are those deceivers, he calls them in verse 7, that do not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. We talked about that from 1 John. And these are deceivers and antichrist. Again, our definition of antichrist is one that thinks that for some reason, Jesus could not have been both 100% man and 100% flesh. And so maybe he didn't come in the flesh. All kind of ideas as to how that could work. And again, I'll be quite honest, it boggles my mind to think that God could take on human flesh, would take on human flesh, and that he would then allow that human flesh to die for my sins. But that's the truth of what happens. I don't need to understand how he made that happen, how the person who created my body and every body, heavenly body, everybody's body, could take on a body. I don't need to understand how that happens. That's where some faith and belief comes in. I believe it did happen. That is the truth. And there are deceivers out there who, because they have a perceived higher level of knowledge, are going to teach something different. And they transgress and do not abide in the doctrine of Christ. Verse 9, and that for that reason, they do not have God, because they don't continue in the things that were taught from the beginning. What was taught from the beginning, you're holding it. What you've read in these scriptures show Jesus as the Christ, 100% God, 100% man. There's nothing more to be discovered. And so if anyone comes to you, verse 10, 11, pretty key to this whole book. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, the doctrine that Jesus is the Christ, that he came to this earth, dwelt, died in the flesh, rose in the flesh. You realize that the only way to touch the holes in his hands and the hole in his side was for him to be in the flesh when he rose. He eats fish in the Gospel according to John. We find him eating fish and eating with them. In the other Gospels as well, they have food together. But in John in particular, he's up by the seashore with them. He's cooking up, some food for them when they come in from the sea, and he eats with them. And so if anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his evil deed. So if you invite someone in that's teaching that, you're letting the congregation know, letting the world know, I agree with this guy's teaching, because we're going to fellowship together. And of course, that's then going to bring more untruth, more lies. And John is warning this elect lady, who is evidently pretty open to being hospitable to people. You don't have to be, you're supposed to love, but that doesn't mean you love untruth or give any kind of well, I know he's a false teacher, but I love him, and so I'll bring him into my home and be hospitable to him and let everybody know that he's an okay guy, even though he's teaching things that are against the truth and will keep you from being in God. The same kind of thing happens in 3 John. Only in 3 John, we're now addressed to a guy by the name of Gaius. And Gaius is beloved, according to verse 1 there, in truth. Paul said, or John writes, whom I love in truth. Again, he's focusing on our fellowship and our love for one another, and being all a part of the truth. And so he prays, and I love this verse 2. 3 John verse 2 is I think a beautiful verse. He says, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. What I read what I hear in my head when I read that is, I hope that your physical health is doing as well as your spiritual health. Now, for some people, that wouldn't be so hot. For Gaius, John seems to believe and indicate, I know your spiritual health is great. I hope that your physical health is just as good. And that seems to be a compliment to Gaius. Why? Because testimony has come to John that the truth is in him and that he walks in the truth, and he has no greater joy than to hear that his children, that is John's children, are walking in truth. Gaius, you're one of my children. You continue in the truth. You've accepted the truth. You walk in the truth. That's your daily way of life. And so I hope you're physically doing just as well. Now, in verse 5, he gives a reason why he believes he's doing so well spiritually, and that is because he is what he's doing for the brethren and for strangers. He's being hospitable to them. He's showing them that love and sending them forward to continue to preach the truth. And John says, for that, you're doing very well. And um, that you know that when you receive these who are going out telling the truth, that you are in fellowship uh, with the workers for the truth. That's where we want to get, again, not partaking of those who are teaching the false doctrine, but fully. It's fine to stand against false doctrine, should stand against false doctrine. John's emphasis here, though, is you are promoting the truth. And so we want to do both. We want to stand against the false doctrine, but we want to promote and help along and feed the truth. Now, there are some, according to John here in 3rd John, that are not. He gives a man by the name of Diotrephes. Diotrephes, he levels 4 accusations against. You know, Gaius seems to have accepted those that are bringing the truth. Diotrephes is standing against them. He does not receive. John says us, and us would be John, obviously as an apostle. Maybe the other apostles are also working in this realm. Whatever the case might be, John just he doesn't receive us. Who wouldn't receive John the apostle? Well, maybe someone who was worried that his own authority, Diotrephes' authorities, would be would he'd lose that power and influence because he accepted somebody that came from John. Well, if they're both teaching the truth, the old phrase goes, lighthouses aren't in competition. They're both spreading the truth. And so he does not receive them. In fact, the New King James uses the word prating against us with malicious words. In other words, he's talking foolishness about us. Then he doesn't receive the brethren, and anybody who does, he forbids them and puts them out of the church. And so he obviously has some authority wherever he's located, and he's allowed that authority to kind of go to his head. And if you accept someone else who's preaching the truth, he's putting you out. Now, there's another guy, Demetrius, who has the opposite kind of testimony, and from the truth itself. The truth itself is bearing out that Demetrius is one that you might imitate, not Diotrephes. And so that's John's encouragement here to Gaius, similar to the encouragement he gave to the elect or chosen lady in 2nd John, and the message he gives to all the church in 1st John. So these have been my thoughts on 2nd and 3rd John. Hope they've been helpful for you. And as always, our prayer is to allow the Word of God to be a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path.